Although at the end of the Civil War, Whittier saw the fruits of his labor in the abolition of human slavery, his celebrations were overshadowed by the death of Elizabeth, his devoted sister. Whittier, who had also lost his mother and older sister before the war's end, entered his mature years in a reflective mood, with the memories of his loving family to give theme to his greatest poetic works.
As the country was going from an agricultural society to an industrial society, there was a lot of unrest. The war was over, everyone was tired. And he was thinking about all of the things he had done as a boy on the farm, the values of hard work, the values of his Quaker heritage, the family affection, which was one of the main things in his life, the 5 generations on the farm. That whole family sharing of things comes across. And particularly, as I mentioned, after the Civil War, this was something that the country needed. It was a salve. It was soothing after all the turmoil. It's hard to understand in the 20th century just how popular a man Whittier was. He really didn't do very well financially with his poetry until Snowbound came out, and that seems to have been the right poem at the right time.
The sun, that brief December day, rose cheerless over hills of gray, and darkly circled gave at noon a sadder light than waning moon.
Whittier didn't like snow, as a matter of fact. And the central thing about Snowbound as a poem is that its main image is not the snow, but the capacity of the people living inside that house to light the fire and to get physical warmth, cook their food, and then be surrounded by the kind of emotional and psychological warmth and love that comes from sitting by a fire.
Shut in from all the world without, we sat the clean-winged hearth about, content to let the north wind roar in baffled rage at pane and door, while the red logs before us beat the frost line back with tropic heat.
It's not just a simple poem about a snowstorm. It's really about the larger dimensions of how we live, what makes life valuable. And Whittier takes the elements, and people read it, he called it a series of Flemish pictures, portraits. And they are. He takes a series of vignettes about his family as he knew them, the stories they told, the places they went, who they were, where they came from, and he gives you portraits.
Our father rode again his ride on Memphremagog's wooded side. Our mother, while she turned her wheel, a-run the new-knit stocking heel, told how the Indian hordes came down at midnight on Cochico town. Upon the motley braided mat, our youngest and our dearest sat, lifting her large, sweet, asking eyes, now bathed in the unfading green and holy peace of paradise.
He talks more about the fact that they're dead, and they're gone, and they're lost. And how do you handle that? No fire can keep those faces around its hearth forever. And so Whittier goes into another dimension of what it means to have lost.
What matter how the night behaved? What matter how the north wind raved? Blow high, blow low, not all its snow could quench our hearth fire's ruddy glow. Oh, time and change, with hair as gray as was my sire's that winter day, how strange it seems, with so much gone of life and love, to still live on.
Let the wind roar. It can't stop what's going on in this house. And he paused and said, but time and change have done it. And he says, here am I, an old man, writing this poem, and they're all gone.
Following the national success of Snowbound, Whittier's popularity surpassed even that of Longfellow. The image of a fiery reformer softened to become a revered portrait of a white-bearded old man gently spinning out rustic tales of long ago.
But after Snowbound, anything he wrote was received avidly by the public, and he put out, of course, several volumes of poetry afterward, and the world was knocking at his door. People came from all over, and really, he called them pilgrims, and he was really pestered by them. But he did enjoy, there's no doubt that he did enjoy the adulation that he received.
In the years following Snowbound, Whittier became an American monument whose birthdays garnered national attention.
It was the custom of publishers to use the 70th birthday of one of their writers. I suppose it was an indirect form of advertising. And Whittier's was scheduled on his birthday, December 17th. And curiously, up to the last minute, he hadn't really decided to go. He'd been told by his doctor to avoid excitement. But a number of Amesbury young women went to see him that morning, taking along a few birthday presents. And one of them gave him a pair of gloves. And he rather liked the looks of those gloves, and she told me later, when she was quite old, she thought that was the determining factor. He decided he would go to Boston after all. They helped him get ready and get him aboard the train. But if it hadn't been for that pair of gloves, the chief guest might have been absent. The party itself was at the Hotel Brunswick, new and gorgeous. Quite a long and elaborate meal. Different kinds of wine were served, somewhat to his displeasure. And it was at that birthday celebration that Mark Twain made one of his greatest failures in a speech. A Mark Twain speech he thought would be a success. It was about three impostors who pretended they were great American authors, Longfellow and Emerson and Holmes, who were so greatly respected in New England. But of course, Mark Twain thought he had made a terrible mistake, that he had been indirectly throwing ridicule on these sacred figures in New England at that time. And I think he regretted for years that he had made the speech, but no harm seems to have been done to the important people concerned.
He was the elder statesman of the poets, and truly revered and worshipped by that time. Whittier, California was established in 1887, and they actually wrote a letter to Whittier asking if he would mind if they named the community for him. It was a Quaker settlement, and he agreed to that, and they actually gave him a piece of land in the town, which he never saw. There are at least 3 other communities, there's one in Alaska and one in North Carolina, that were named for Whittier. And we don't even have any idea how many schools. There are numerous high schools and elementary schools all around the country that were named for Whittier. Some of his poems are really, really good. His ballads particularly describe New England. He was one of the first really to start collecting legends and traditions and writing them up in his poetry and in his prose in the 1850s and 60s. I think a lot of that's valuable to our heritage of the past of New England, as well as trying to understand the 19th century, and particularly in this Merrimack Valley and in the Haverhill area, where so much of what he was writing about back then is still here today. You can go and see the things he was talking about. You can feel some of the feelings he did as he went along the Merrimack River, by the Laurels in Newburyport, on the beach or out to the Isles of Shoals, or even up to the mountains in New Hampshire.
Visitors to the Merrimack Valley can follow the Whittier Trail to several historic sites in the Haverhill area. The trail begins at the Haverhill Historical Society's Buttonwoods Museum on the scenic banks of the Merrimack River. Continuing on, the trail passes the beautiful Canosa Lake area before concluding with a tour of the Whittier birthplace.
Whittier's abolitionist work was probably the most significant public work he did. It's what he's remembered for. He got a tremendous poetic return from being an abolitionist. The writing he did allowed him finally to write things like Snowbound or Telling the Bees, because it pared down all the nonsense to get at what is true. And he made propaganda at times into art. His work as an abolitionist, though, aside from that, is really significant, I think. Of all our public figures, whether it be Emerson, Thoreau, Longfellow, Holmes, you name all the significant figures, Whittier was the one figure, a figure of literary fame, who put on the line his beliefs.
Whittier's death in 1892 brought to a close a lifetime richly embroidered with both activism and literary fame.
When on my day of life the night is falling, and in the winds from unsunned spaces blown, I hear far voices out of darkness calling my feet to paths unknown.
Yet his early days as a farm boy will stand forever as the backdrop of the words he left behind.
With the sunshine on thy face, through thy torn brim's jaunty grace, from my heart I give thee joy. I was once a barefoot boy.